guys, so can you believe it, episode 4 or 5 already. We hope you've enjoyed the show so far and found it really helpful, and thanks for interacting with us on the various social media platforms.
For this episode's Uni Life, Paul has done an informative video on teamwork.
Well, teamwork is something that all university students will have to do at some time in their university life. And from my experience, what a lot of trouble it causes many students. So what I'm going to do is give you some tips here on how you perform and how you do your teamwork. Now, the first thing to say is that different institutions will have different policies for forming teams. And in fact, different academics in different institutions will have different policies. Basically, as to the best of my knowledge, there are about 3 ways of doing it. 2 that I've heard others do, and then thirdly, a way that I have adopted. And maybe you can persuade your academic to adopt my method. It works quite well, actually. So firstly, many universities, they just ask the admins people to put the students into teams, and you have to work with somebody you've never met before, which is something that actually you're going to have to do when you join the world of work. So it's not a bad experience for you. And then the other method is that they might ask you to self-select, and this can be very informal. The method that I use actually is speed dating. What I do is I get my students to meet each other, find out about each other. They have to write a little CV, their personal CV, and I get them changing every minute in the classroom, so they've got a chance to get to meet people with different skills and different abilities, because that's the key to a team. You don't want people with the same skills and same abilities. You want people with different skills and different abilities in your team. So speed dating is a very good way of doing it, and I would urge you to persuade your lecturer to let you and your teammates be formed by speed dating. However, not all are going to agree to that. So what can we do about our teamwork? What are the problems we have with teamwork? Well, the first thing I've noticed with a problem with teamwork are freeloaders, and you do not want freeloaders. Also, another problem is making a decision. Now, I always tell teams to be made of numbers of odd numbers, actually. So therefore, you can either have 3, 5 or 7. I think an ideal size of a team is 5, but what that means is that you can never disagree and not come to an agreement, because there's always going to be one person, the odd person, who can go on one side or the other. In fact, when I form teams, I tell one person to be the team leader, and they can manage the team, and that's very important to have a team leader, in my opinion, and that will help to keep things together. And in fact, the team leaders are often, I suggest to them that they should be the editor of the work, because you've got to put it together, whether it's a presentation or an assignment that you have to do as teamwork. Somebody's got to put it together and edit it. So have a team leader. So let me just go back to one thing, freeloaders. Now, I know a lot of universities would have the policy that you shouldn't sack somebody on the team, but actually, why shouldn't you? Because if they're not performing, then you want to get rid of them. Now, if you want to do this, I would strongly suggest you speak to your academic lead on this and ask them for their advice, because some universities say, well, no, you can't do that. But in my view, come on, you don't want a freeloader, get them off, out of the way. So that's up to your university. So be careful. Don't just think that you can do that without asking them. So there is a model called Belbin, and you can see the URL running across the screen there. And Belbin sort of categorises as 9 categories of types of people. And what you need to do once you're forming the team, find out the types of people that are in your team and try and get the combination of different types of people in your team. And Belbin, as I say, is very helpful in terms of forming teams. So just to recap, if you can, ask your academic if you can do some speed dating to form your team. Don't accept freeloaders, and make sure you have different characters in the team. And even if you're told who you're working with, try to find out about the characters and apply Belbins. Well, teamwork. talking to students and my experience with students on teamwork is it's either a glorious event and everything's happy, or it is right down in the pits, the most miserable thing they have to do in their life. How's it been for you two?
Well, I've definitely had some that are just in the middle rather than one end of the spectrum or the other. Yeah, I feel like it's just dependent on a lot of factors that can be out of your control, so that can be quite frustrating. But ultimately, there are like little things you can do to sort of try and make things like a little bit easier on yourself. Trying to think of some examples now.
Yes, well, what examples have you got?
So maybe just sort of things like keeping up communications, make sure everyone knows what they're doing. Just those like little things can kind of just help everything run a little bit more smoothly.
Yeah, and once you know what everyone's doing, if
Yeah.
they're doing it, that
Yeah.
sort of thing, yeah, I agree.
What's the worst type of experience you've had, or what would you say is the cause of the worst experience usually?
There's always different personalities. I can't say anyone's ever like properly fallen out in a group project. I know it's happened, but not with me, thankfully. But I think it's when there's someone who just isn't doing anything. I think that is.
You mean
a very-
freeloaders?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a common experience, and I just feel like.
I think there's a
frustrating.
difficulty here for universities with freeloaders, because I know my colleagues would say to the teams, look, you've got to sort it out yourself. My view is that if they were a freeloader in industry, they'd be out of the company, out of the team if they're really bad. And I think students have the right to throw somebody out of a team if they're not acting, if they're being a freeloader and not making a contribution. Now, I know that you will feel a bit mean doing that, but sometimes life has got to be hard. You've got to be hard and ruthless, because that's what it'll be like in industry.
I do think that that's like one side, but I also think that like sometimes you don't know everyone's
You don't know what's going on,
circumstances, but also you shouldn't have to suffer because of that. Like it's not really your responsibility, so it can be like hard to do that. But I think just raising it with like a member of staff first is like definitely the first point of call, and just sort of seeing what they're doing, and if there is someone who isn't really doing any of the work, just making sure that somebody is aware of it early on, or like raising it to them first, of course.
Maybe, try to understand why as well, because maybe they're doing something that they don't understand and someone else in the group can help out with it. So,
but surely then this should be avoided at the beginning if roles are allocated according to the skills of the different members of the team. Do you not think? Because usually with a team project, you've got different things to achieve for the final outcome. Do you not think that's a good way of sort of allocating roles?
I think it depends on the group project. For a lot of ours in uni, because ours is like a sciencey one, even though the roles are different, there is kind of like a big overlap. A big overlap. For example, in our third year group project, we did have like a project manager, but then we also had like someone in finance, and then like pretty much everyone else was sciencey. I think for that one I was like health and safety, but that was very much linked to the lab people. I can't remember the official name for it, but a lot of it was linked. And if there's like one role where there's less to do, then I feel like it's quite okay to help out with one of the other roles.
Did your teams always have a team leader? Because I always think a team leader is quite important, and also linked to a team leader is having an odd number rather than even numbers of members of the team. So 3, 5, 7. I would think 5's the ideal, but having that so that there's one person can actually mediate in any dispute.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I also think like 5 is a good number because there's not too many personalities to balance. I feel like you can sort of, everyone in a group of 5, you sort of know everyone's thoughts. It's much easier to communicate. But I do think it's not necessarily down to the students a lot of the time how many people are in a group. So that's also...
You see, this is another thing. Did you find, generally speaking, if your lecturer said you can self-select, that made for a better team than if they were selected for you?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's an easy answer, isn't it?
Yeah.
One word.
I think it will depend on like the different subjects, the different sort of, just sort of like your course like mixture. For ours, I feel like we were friends, a lot of us, so it was quite easy to. Well, we were friends with like people who were kind of similar and had the same sort of motivation
As we
levels.
wanted to, yeah.
Like we all knew that we weren't gonna like screw one of the other ones over and not do anything.
How about though, you know, if you are friends in a team, does that not raise difficulty if one member of the team who is a friend of yours is not pulling their weight and even a freeloader? How do you manage that? Because you don't want to fall out with your friends.
I feel like because they're your friend, if they are your friend, they shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's kind of easier to be like, I think you need to do that to your friend rather than a stranger. I don't know, I feel like it kind of makes it easier to approach them and be like...
And also, like, is there a reason that you're not doing it? Because I feel like when people make friends, they make friends with people that's kind of like them. For example, I'm friends with Celia, we were in a group project together. I wasn't about to just be like, oh no, Celia, I'm doing nothing. You think I did everything.
Yeah, you don't want to drag everyone down if you care about them as well.
Yeah.
And if I wasn't doing much work, then I feel like Celia would know, like, oh, what's up with Raheela, rather than like she's doing it for like just being lazy.
So have either of you got any final tips for the viewers?
I would say the key thing from my perspective is just communication. Just make sure to keep up the communication throughout. Maybe have regular check-ins to see where everyone is, and if there's any sort of blockers or anything that sort of people need help with. Because even though there is like the individual roles, it's still a team project, and just like help each other communicate.
Yeah, and I think just leaving time for editing, leave enough time for editing. That's so. It always takes so much more time than you think it would. So just set a deadline way before your due date to edit, because it's so time consuming.
Yeah, and I think with that one as well, when you're editing, make sure that it's obvious that it's not obvious, that it's not written by the same person.
Yeah.
Just so that when you're editing, just sort of like go through and make sure that like the language style is consistent.
So it's consistent, so it doesn't look like 5 different people have written it. Yeah.
Good point.
For this episode of Student Life, all 3 of us have posted some recipes on Instagram.
So the idea behind those Instagram videos was just to compare buying a takeout with something made in, which is what we essentially did on the Instagram making.
And what do you favour? Take out or make in?
It depends if you're talking about convenience, then
I was gonna say that. I think personally I prefer takeout, but my budget prefers making. That's what I do.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I show with my shepherd's pie, how little it costs and how much you can get for it. And I included, if I remember rightly, I included the cost of my electricity in the cost of the shepherd's pie, and I got 7. And in fact, I gave it to my girlfriend, which she was lucky, of course, that I did this for her. But it was in the end, you know, it was really very cost effective, because you couldn't have possibly made the same paid the same if you'd have had a takeout. So, how much of an incentive as students is it for you to make in rather than take out? From when you're students, how much of an incentive?
I think a lot of students are probably on a tight budget. I think there's a
incentive there.
It's
not really an incentive, it's more like a...
Not a choice.
But did you typically, would you say students would make stuff like I did with my shepherd's pie and freeze it?
I mean, I think it depends. I've had friends who would make everything or like eat like straight crackers all through uni, and then I've had friends who've like never boiled an egg. So it depends. So
with the friends who never boil the egg, are they more economically wealthy?
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Oh, right. So do you think students would prefer to obviously buy out or have something a pre-made product from the supermarket rather than make it themselves, or do you think there's some pleasure? Do students get pleasure from making for themselves?
I think it depends on the student.
Yeah, I think it's very dependent on your personality for that one.
Yeah, I can't say I cook that much, but I do think that there's like a certain satisfaction to making it yourself. But also I feel like I can't say that because I don't cook that much myself.
But do you know something? I was in Liverpool a few weeks ago, and I was watching Deliveroo and all these delivery companies on their bikes. And a thought occurred to me. What these delivery companies do for takeouts is actually they make their deliveries fit and the customers fat. If you think about it, you see where I'm coming from. It just struck me as I was watching them cycle up the hill. I thought, you're getting fit, and the people who are going to eat these are going to get fat because they're not doing any exercise. Because the delivery company, you don't even go and walk and pick it up. You take out, you actually have it delivered. Which seems to be a bit not very good for our health, really. Would you say that making yourself is healthier?
Yeah, I guess actually making it is generally a lot healthier, yeah.
And is that because you use ingredients, better ingredients?
Yeah.
I mean, you can read labels, but you never know really how good the ingredients are.
Yeah.
Also, you know what you're getting, and I think, like, not even labels, because a lot of fruit and veg don't have labels.
No.
So I feel like if you can, like, go and get it yourself, you know the quality of the ingredients. So there is satisfaction in that, I think.
Yeah. Oh well, hopefully more of you, as a result of seeing our recipes on Instagram, will post your own recipes on Instagram, share with others, and of course decide to cook for yourself rather than go to the takeout. And bear that in mind. The people who benefit from the takeout and the delivered food are the people who do the delivery, not you, so be careful. In this episode, Dr Amy Benstead attempts to answer the question, does being sustainable actually make a difference? Do you actually think being sustainable can really make a difference?
Yeah, I think we need to change. We need to make a difference, and little steps, whether that's you reducing the amount of plastic waste in your house, or you are not buying as many clothes, or you're looking after your clothes for longer, or you're, I don't know, donating to charity. Nothing's perfect, and we've said there are complexities, but if you are trying to reduce the amount of waste, or you're trying to make conscious decisions about where you spend your money, I think that's only going to encourage more change. And I think companies will have to change if consumers start changing their buying behaviour as well, or start being more inquisitive and start asking more questions.
I think that actually is quite important, like we said before, about asking questions and checking everything, really. I know it can be a bit painful, and young people, the fast pace of life, and our student family members with their fast pace of life, they might not have time to check. But I think that, like you say, there's so much information, and I think we can make a difference. I think a lot of people think, well, what am I going to do? And it goes back to what I said about Armstrong, this small step. If we all make small steps, then that will be a giant leap for mankind. And it's probably because of the small steps for the last 150 years through industrialization that we've got where we are. Now we need to take, somebody would consider those forward steps. Now we need to take some backward steps and actually do something. So basically, we can make a difference. This is what you're saying.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, you might not have the time to check everything, but if you even just check one thing more than you used to, or change just some of your habits, I think then you'll start yourself changing more and more habits as you go through your daily life.
Well, I have to say, I'd be very surprised if Amy had said no to that question, wouldn't you? But the thing is, I think what I was trying to get through to her and ask her to express was, we want to feel. Everybody needs to feel, but by doing their bit, they're making a difference. Do you think you feel that you're making a difference when you are looking at labels, for example, and making sure the product where it comes from is manufactured fairly and fair trade acceptable, for example?
I do feel, sometimes I feel like, I'm getting this done and being so sustainable. And then, like, sometimes you just, like, read about, like, I don't know, oil spills or horrible things, and you're like, is it actually doing anything? So I think it's just kind of nice to know that little changes, they do mean something. So I think...
Just on that point, you mentioned an oil spill, and that's caused by a large company. and their actions. Do you feel that there's the amount of change that you as young people and consumers are making is balanced by a sufficient amount of change that capitalist organisations are making? Do you think there's a balance, and do young people think there's a balance, or do you think you're doing more than they are?
I'm not sure if I could say I'm doing more, because I feel like as one person, like how much...
No, more collectively, I mean.
Oh, collectively, so like all of the young people. I think that's hard to say. I feel like without any figures it's really hard to say, but I think there is definitely like incentives to companies to change, and they're being forced to make differences. And I think even with consumers, how we buy things, just like the need for more green products has forced companies to introduce those things. So I think it's kind of, because we're changing, they have to change. So I think it's more like we do something.
There is a bit of don't you think there's a bit of dilemma? Because if, for example, you buy fewer clothes, I mean collectively, not individually, if you collectively you all decide as young people to buy fewer clothes, then that has an implications on, obviously it benefits the environment, because clothes are actually quite unsustainable in dyes and everything are really bad for the atmosphere, and you're doing that. Also, they will be buying from countries where they're giving employment for people, but unfortunately they may be employing people under modern slavery conditions. So do you not think there's a lot of dilemmas for us, and taking the big picture is really difficult for us to make a good decision? What do you think?
I think that there's a lot of different facets to it. It's like a very complicated thing to think about, so it's quite important to just sort of think about the things that you can control yourself. So like you can't really control the big corporations too much. Like you can obviously try and sort of rally for different legislation and things like that, which is obviously quite a good thing to do, but the little changes you make yourself is something that you can quite easily control, which I think is the part to...
Yeah, but of course, how radical do you want to be? Because, think about it, if the women suffragettes hadn't changed themselves to Parliament, women might not get the vote. So it took radical action. How radical do you think you should be, or you can be?
I don't know. That was a hard question to answer.
It is, yeah. I feel like, I mean, you have to be passionate about some things, and like there's some people who are passionate about this, other people about like, I don't know, politics, but it does affect us. So I feel like it is something that is worth at least putting the effort into. I think you can put the effort either by like rallying or being radical. Like, I'm not going to stop anyone and say no, because it is our planet and that sort of thing. But I also think, like, you know, even making small changes in your life that don't, I don't know, get you arrested can also...
So you're not thinking of joining Extinction Rebellion?
Not at the moment, no, not me personally.
Yeah, it is. There are a lot of dilemmas, really, aren't there?
And it's quite complicated.
It's really hard to make
a
good decisions.
As young people, do you feel hopeful for the future?
I think you have to. I think you have to hold on to it. I feel like just like you need to feel like you can make a difference and do something, or else why?
And that's really what Amy was saying, that we can all make a little difference, and we just have to contribute to the collective whole to make a big difference, really. Yeah.
So if you guys want to let us know what you think about this topic, then interact with us on the various social medias. We'll set up some Instagram polls and things like that. We really want to know what you guys think.
Right, and that concludes episode 4. Hope you join us for the final episode, and remember to like and subscribe.
Bye.